I'm back, motherfucker. What's up? Let's talk about video games. Let's go. All right. Dragon Age. Dragon Age. All right. It's one of my favorite games, the first one. Some of the best lore, some of the best writing I've ever seen in games. And that shit's important to me, man. It's like, why should I care about this game versus any other game I could be fucking playing? There's a million fucking generic ass games with bad writing, which is like generic fucking concepts, and they're all the exact same. And why should I be playing this game instead of fucking that game over there? You know what I mean? And if I'm not emotionally invested in the characters of the world or what's happening, and I don't fucking give a shit, then why should I even be playing? You know what I mean? Essentially, at the end of the day, you could look at it and you say, oh, it's doing like it's doing the Tolkien thing, where it's got the dwarves and the elves or whatever, which is technically true, but they have their own take on the dwarves and their culture and their society. You know what I'm saying? They have their own take on the elves and stuff like that. They have their own take on magic and how magic works and why it works that way and how that affects society and how society has to be structured around that, because magic's fucking dangerous. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not properly instructed in magic, it's fucking dangerous as shit. Like, you could be fucking possessed by a demon, basically. Like, the afterlife in this game, it's not just a concept, it's an actually established fucking place. It's called the Fade, and there's like a thin veil between our world and the Fade, and in places where there's been a lot of like fucking massacre, like a battlefield or something like that, there'll be a thin veil in the Fade where spirits can come through, and mages are like a priority target for these fucking things because they be able to wield their power. And so basically mages are herded off into these fucking towers, right? And it's, you know, you've seen the concept of like schools for magic users before, but this is basically like more of like a prison kind of, although it is where they're instructed and everything, but they're not allowed to leave. So then there's some people who will hide the fact that their children have affinity to magic. They'll just try to conceal that. And if there's a mage who's living outside of the jurisdiction of the tower, basically they're called an apostate. You know what I mean? They're like on the run from the law and shit like that. And there's this religious order that has these knights called the Templars, whose job is to hunt down apostate mages. So there's this fucking rivalry between mages and Templars and shit like that. Like, I could go into examples from the game, but not only is it really cool on the surface level, but what the real result of that is the shit feels like a well thought out, like realistic fucking world that you're inhabiting. You know what I mean? The shit feels like novel level, you know what I mean? And that's what it takes for me to really give a fuck about a game. And it's rare, because a lot of games have shitty writing. And I didn't want to admit, for a long time I used to stand up for games like, no, video games have great writing, you know? But I think I finally accept that now, that like 95% of game stories fucking suck. You know what I mean? And it's upsetting to me because I've heard the case be made before that like video games just aren't a good medium for storytelling, which I think that's absolutely false. I just think they don't often tell good stories because probably companies either don't care or they don't realize that a story is fucking important. So I had played this game before and I'd beaten it before, but it was a long time ago. I think I was in college at the time. And I wanted to replay it, and I specifically wanted to go through the series to play Veilguard when that comes out, but I mistimed it. Dude, Veilguard's out already. It's out like Halloween. And I mistimed it. I'm like 2 games behind still, so fuck it. Now, I might even buy the copy of the game just to support them, because I want them to, you know, keep making games and shit, but I'm not ready to play it just yet. And I don't think it's strictly necessary to play them all. It's not like that kind of a sequel. Like, I think they're all pretty self-contained or whatever, but I just like doing that because I'm nuts. So, anyway, Dragon Age Origins, I had played it before, and so that made me sort of be a little bit cavalier about the character I was building. I kind of just made like a silly character. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And towards the end of the game, I finally had enough skill points to make him useful, but he was kind of just a fucking... He was kind of a waste of space for most of the time. But hey, I actually think, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that I've been such a person in the past to re-roll a character if I wasn't happy with them, or if I was getting bored or whatever. I would just start over. You know what I mean? So that's some progress that I was able to get through, specifically with a character I kind of didn't like. I was able to go through the whole game and stick with it. That's pretty cool. But basically, I made him like a heavy plate armor wearing like archer, which didn't make sense. But I was like, oh, you can do this, so that's kind of funny. You know what I mean? And so I wanted him because my character was a human noble. There's 6 different origins that you can pick from in the game. You know what I mean? Which is pretty cool because they all essentially, like 2 hours into the game, they all feed into the same path. But it gives you such a sense of like who you are. You know what I mean? It gives you like a customized little origin based on what you pick. That you can pick to be a mage in the tower. You can pick to be, I picked a human noble. You could pick a dwarf who's either on the surface, who's cut off from society, you know, under the mountains or whatever, or you can pick a dwarf who's in the mountains. Then you can pick an elf who's like in a tribe in the woods and like connected to their old ways, or you could pick an elf who's like in the slums in a human city who's been like fucking detached from the old ways and they're like mistreated by the humans and shit. Like it's almost like slavery type shit. You know what I mean? So there's all these different origins. In the history of this world, it's not just history, it's like the mythology of this world almost. You know what I mean? Because it works into their religious beliefs. This past civilization, the society was led by mages. Instead of, you know, in the current society where mages are almost like fucking cattle or whatever. But in the past, the mages were the rulers because they had the power. The mages were so warped and corrupted by their own ego and their own pride and shit that they literally tried to usurp heaven. They tried to go through the Fade, which I told you is like this veil that separates our world from the fucking spirit world or whatever, through using blood magic. So apparently they tried to enter the Golden City, which is where fucking God lived, basically. They call him the Maker. So basically they tried to enter the Golden City and it turned black. You know what I mean? It corrupted the fucking city. And then the Maker cast them out. And they became the first Darkspawn, which are like these corrupted fucking creatures who every so many years, it's unpredictable, it could be hundreds of years could go by, but the Darkspawn will amass on the surface of the planet and it'll be called a blight, and they'll just try to fucking kill everyone. They're coming for everyone, dog. So the Grey Wardens were the society that came up that beat down the first blight, and they basically saved humanity. So Grey Wardens are still around, they still have their society, and they still train, and they still conscript new members and stuff like that. But society doesn't really believe in it anymore. They think it's just stories and stuff like that. So this game is set like, alright, you get recruited into the Grey Wardens right as this blight is happening. But most people, like the king doesn't believe it's a true blight. You know what I mean? He thinks it's just like a rising of some darkspawn or whatever. But he doesn't think it's a true blight, because a true blight there has to be a fucking dragon. Basically, they're called it's called an archdemon, right? When a dragon has been corrupted by the blight, it turns into like a blight dragon, and it leads the horde. It has like hive minds, and it's commanding the horde. That's what makes it a true blight. So they haven't seen a dragon at this point. They're not taking the threat seriously, and some shit goes down. Basically, it's really a cool setup, man. Early on, you come into the possession of these documents, all right? And these are sworn treaties that hundreds of years ago, different organizations swore to assist the Grey Wardens in the next blight, right? Like the Dwarves of Orzammar have this signed treaty. They have to come to the assistance of the Grey Wardens. And a tribe of Dalish elves, they have sworn to come to the assistance of the Grey Wardens. And the Mage Tower has sworn to come to the assistance of the Grey Wardens. Yeah, and technically you can go wherever you want, and you can fulfill these contracts in whatever order you want. But technically, behind the scenes, they don't really tell you, but there is a recommended order of doing it because there's difficulty scaling or whatever. But it's cool having the control. You can go wherever you want. So yeah, I sort of had this silly character that I eventually, by the end of the game, turned him into something useful. But the narrative of the game really carried me through, even though I wasn't really digging how my character played. But the companions are really good. It's a BioWare game, so basically you can just control one of the other characters and just, you know, play as them or whatever if you're bored. So You know, it's a Bioware game, so there's romance options. I don't know if you can romance a bear, like in Baldur's Gate 3. Apparently, you can romance a bear, but there is a chick in this game who's a shapeshifter, so maybe. So basically, I didn't want to romance Morrigan. She's the Witch of the Wilds that you meet early on, and she's a very important character, whatever. But I didn't want to romance her because I did that last time I played the game. And then I kind of learned this time around that the game was kind of encouraging you along that path. Like, it's not hard to romance her, basically. You just talk to her enough. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to do that again this time. I wanted to romance someone else. But it wasn't letting me. Like, I kept talking to her. So I felt like an insult. Like, I keep talking to her and she hasn't even slept with me yet. Like, but for real, I felt like I was missing something, like I did something wrong. I was giving them gifts, you know, because they're just giving her gifts. No, there's literally a gift-giving system. Like, there's items in the game that only one character wants. You know what I mean? And I think it lets you give it to the wrong character, but then they'll just be like, oh, thanks. You know, but if you give it to the right character, it's like, oh, I really appreciate this or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I was giving them gifts, and there's probably so many you could give the wrong one. You know, there's probably extra. But I went online to see exactly who you should give it to, so I gave all the right gifts to this character, right? So apparently, I spiked their approval rating like too high. I was supposed to gradually hit a certain point and then go down a certain dialogue tree and learn something about them, and then at the next point, it unlocked another dialogue tree. I went right past that. I pulled out like diamond rings. I pulled out, I said, hey, baby. You know what I mean? And so I shot right. She's just like, I love you, you know what I mean? And it just, the game got confused. It had never even let us get into a romance, but she loved me, dog. So anyway, so I just went back to Morrigan, the shapeshifter. You know what I mean? But it does have good narrative implications for the end of the game if you are in a relationship with Morrigan. So I actually do recommend that. I recommend sleeping with Morrigan. No, that sounds weird. But yeah, dude. No, so like I really like the game. I really like BioWare. BioWare, man, back in like Knights of the Old Republic days, like BioWare, that shit was epic, dog. And that was a company, if you heard the name, you could just trust that it was going to be a good game. And they've fallen off in recent years. They really have. And it's good to see that people seem to be supporting Veilguard so far. It seems to be doing pretty good. You know, the reviews are good. I think the fans are maybe there's some mixed reception among some of the crowd. But I'm excited to get my hands on it. And I know it's slightly become more of like an action game and maybe more appealing to a wider audience. But that's reality, baby. That's business. You know what I mean? I understand it. I accept it. And, you know, I'm not against action games. If I wanted to play the tactical one, I could play Dragon Age Origins. And then if I want to play the action ones, I could go to the other ones. You know what I'm saying? So I don't get upset about stuff like that. As long as the companions are good and the story's good and engaging, and it's already a cool world, so they already have that checked off. And apparently in the new one, you go to locations and stuff that were only spoken about in the first game, so it's kind of cool. I'm like, oh shit, I can go there. Like, I heard all about that. That's the home world of this other species, the Qunari, and that's where they come from, and I can go and see that. So that's pretty cool, man. So I love Dragon Age. I recommend Dragon Age if you liked if you really like Baldur's Gate 3 recently. They probably have similarities. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is probably better. You know, we're talking about a 15-year-old game, but you know, if you're looking for more of that, or maybe early inspirations of that, or good examples of that, or whatever, Dragon Age is all about that. Dragon Age Origins is all about that.